Have you ever heard of a man who died, but then stepped out of his tomb and no one could explain how? Have you ever wondered if you were brought back from death, could you ever live the same again? This isn't the story told in synagogues or Sunday schools. This is the story of Ezra, a man who passed through death's shadow and returned carrying something heaven didn't speak of and earth couldn't explain. He didn't come back as a symbol. He came back as a question. A miracle happened, but what truly took place behind heaven's silence? Next, Jard's going. On the southern slopes of the Masada Plain, where the sun scorched every stone and the wind scraped across the desert like a knife, a small house of baked clay trembled under a growing silence. Inside, faint groans could be heard, barely audible, but haunting. Ezra, a man known for his quiet strength and gentle ways, was lying between life and something else, something darker. This wasn't a common illness, not fever, not exhaustion. It was something subtle, insidious, a darkness that leaked from within, slowly unraveling the man once called the teacher's friend. Ema, his older sister, noticed first. She watched him drift, not into sleep, but into some distant void. His eyelids fluttered slowly. His breath came heavier with each passing hour. And Sarah, the youngest, began to pray, whispering ancient psalms from the prophet Isaiah, kneeling beside his bed, her fingers trembling against the cold earth floor. The sickness came like a shadow slipping under the door, quiet, sure, and unrelenting. Ezra did not cry out. He didn't complain. But his eyes stared upward, unmoving, as if trying to remember a face long forgotten. There were moments when he smiled faintly, moments when tears rolled silently down his cheeks, not from pain, but from something else entirely. Desperate, Ema called upon a shepherd boy, sending him down the rocky path toward Jericho. His task was urgent. Deliver one sentence to the teacher, just one. Lord, the one you love is gravely ill. He departed under the fading light of a crescent moon, trusting the teacher would come, would arrive in time to save. But hours passed. Then a full day. Then another. Nothing. No footsteps, no voice, no reply. Back in the house, Ema boiled bitter herbs, hoping to ease his breath. Sarah no longer prayed for healing. She simply begged for one final glance from the teacher, one moment of presence before death would come. And in that heavy stillness, where the sand itself held its breath, a single question rose from their hearts like smoke from smoldering coals. Did he hear us? The message had been sent. The words were clear, urgent, almost trembling on the parchment. Lord, the one you love, is gravely ill. The journey would work the miracle as he had so many times before. But when he arrived, the teacher was still. He wasn't packing, he wasn't rushing, he wasn't even standing. Instead, he looked into the distance, eyes not focused on earth, but somewhere far beyond. Then he spoke, almost to himself. This sickness will not end in death, but for the glory of God. The messenger, confused and hesitant, returned with those words etched in silence. But he brought no companion, no comfort, no movement. Only dust and doubt. Back in Masada, Ema and Sarah continued waiting, but the kind of waiting that breaks the soul, not just the body. With each passing morning, hope peeled away like old plaster from the walls. Each dusk without him was a deeper crack in their faith. In the village, whispers began to swirl like desert wind. Maybe the teacher has more important things to do. Maybe he doesn't love Ezra the way they thought. No one said it aloud, but grief is contagious. Even silence can sound like betrayal. By the third night, Ezra no longer responded. He laughed softly at shadows. His fingers clutched at nothing. His breath grew ragged. His eyes seemed to search places no one else could see. Ema sat beside him, gripping his hand. It was cold now, stone cold. But she didn't cry. She held on as if her grip could anchor him to this world. And then came the fourth night. The moon was red, like a bleeding wound in the sky. Sarah, whose prayers had long run dry, whispered into the dark, "If he doesn't come, does he still love us?" There was no answer, not from the sky, not from the wind. And that was the most painful silence of all. The fourth day began, not with mourning, but with numb acceptance. No more weeping, no more pleading. Just the heavy scent of burial spices, myrrh, frankincense, and the silence of finality. Ezra was dead. His body had been washed, wrapped in clean linen, placed on a stone slab within a tomb carved from the cliffs near Gethresh. A large rock had been rolled in front of the entrance. The grave was now sealed. The end, confirmed. No one questioned it anymore, not Ema, not Sarah, not even the neighbors who came to help. And then, at high noon, a whisper stirred the village like a wildfire leaping from rooftop to rooftop. "He's here. The teacher is coming." Sarah, too weak to stand moments earlier, rose with trembling urgency. Ema didn't speak. She only stared down the dust-choked road where a lone figure in a worn robe approached, dust clinging to his feet, fire in his eyes. He did not weep. He didn't end the life. She didn't respond at first, but her eyes began to shift, from rage to sorrow to something else, surrender. He walked to the tomb. The villagers followed, breathless. Standing before the stone, he raised his hand, not as a man calling a friend, but as the Lord of life commanding the grave. And he shouted, "Ezra, come forth!" Time halted. The wind paused. The earth seemed to tremble. Then, from within the tomb, a sound, cloth brushing against stone, a shuffling step. Ezra emerged, wrapped in linen, pale, eyes closed, but alive. Gasps turned to screams, cries turned to silence. Even the priests could not look away, because what they saw was not just resurrection. It was war, declared on death itself. And death lost. Beth-Geth, once a sleepy village tucked beneath the hills, had become a storm's eye, not from thunder or rain, but from whispers, footprints, and gazes that lingered too long. People came from everywhere, not to mourn, not to worship, but to see. Ezra, the man once buried, now sat quietly beneath the old fig tree. He didn't preach. He didn't explain. He didn't even acknowledge the crowd. But his silence shouted louder than any prophet's cry. He was alive. That was enough. And for the rulers, that was far too much. In the granite halls of the temple, elders gathered in shadow. Pharisees, scribes, and high priests huddled not in prayer, but in panic. "He was dead," one said, pacing, "and now he walks." "If the people believe this," another added, voice shaking, "they will follow him. And if they follow him, we lose everything." This wasn't just about a man walking again. It was about control, about power. A man who had tasted death and returned without their approval? That was no miracle to them. It was a rebellion. Ezra had not spoken a word since his return, but he didn't have to. His existence alone was treason. And so, a verdict was quietly passed. Ezra must die. Again. The decision didn't come from outrage. It came from fear. Deep, ancient fear. Not of Ezra, not even of the teacher, but of a truth they couldn't shape or bury. The word spread, like poison. Hours children pointed. Elders leaned in, hoping for a whisper, a gesture, a clue. Even the village priest came, offering sacred scrolls, asking gently, "Tell us what lies beyond." But Ezra simply looked through them. His eyes held something vast, like he'd seen a horizon that language couldn't reach. Emma, desperate, pleaded, "Please, Ezra, speak. Tell them what he did for you." Ezra gently placed his hand over hers. It was not refusal. It was something deeper, something unspeakable. Sarah, more perceptive, began to understand. Some things cannot be told, and perhaps trying to tell them would only distort the truth. But not everyone had patience for mystery. Maybe he doesn't remember. Maybe he never died at all. Something isn't right. Why would someone return from death and say nothing? Whispers turned to suspicion. Suspicion into rumors. Some called him cursed, others possessed. A few even claimed they saw him talking to the wind. One day, a seasoned scribe approached. He'd questioned zealots, heretics, and mystics, but never someone who had crossed the line of life and returned. He sat before Ezra and asked, "Did you see paradise? Did you walk in the valley of death? If so, why remain silent? Why deny the people your witness?" Ezra didn't move, but slowly he closed his eyes and a single tear escaped. The old man watched in silence. Then, almost reverently, he whispered, "Perhaps your silence is your testimony." And with that, he rose and left. Ezra's quiet had become a mirror, a challenge, a sermon without words. For those who listened with the heart, his silence said what language could never carry: that the sacred isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's whispered through what remains unsaid. By the seventh night, darkness settled heavier than usual over the village, not just over rooftops, but over hearts. They had come. Strangers, well-dressed but quiet. They didn't barter, they didn't worship, they only asked one thing: "Where is Ezra?" The words were soft, but the weight behind them was sharp as a dagger. Emma heard from the water cellar. Sarah caught the look in one man's eyes. They knew. Ezra's silence had lasted too long, and now that silence had become intolerable. That evening, behind a shuttered door and flickering lamp, the three sat in silence. Emma spoke first, barely above a whisper. "You have to leave." Ezra didn't argue. He knew. Being brought back didn't mean being allowed to stay. Before dawn, while the Badlands, across Judea's cracked hills, along trails known only to fugitives and prophets. In each town he used a different name: Benjamin, Eliel, or none at all. He ate wild dates, drank from hidden springs, slept under fig trees, and watched stars that never blinked. In a salt-swept village near the Dead Sea, an old man missing one eye spoke to him. "You smell of the grave, but your eyes carry peace. Are you a man death rejected, or one who has rejected life?" Ezra gave no answer. But as the days passed, a question began to grow inside him. One that burned deeper than fear or survival. Was I raised to live, or to find the reason I was ever born? And that question became his only companion. In a cold dawn on the edge of the Idumean desert, Ezra was gathering dry twigs for fire when a dust-covered traveler stumbled toward him, panting. "They've taken him," the man gasped, collapsing near a pile of rocks. The teacher was betrayed, arrested, last night. Ezra froze. The firewood dropped from his hands. He didn't speak. But deep inside, something broke. He didn't sleep that night. He sat under the stars, staring upward, remembering the moment that still echoed through his soul. Ezra, come forth. The voice that had called him from death, now dragged in chains. At sunrise, Ezra dressed simply, wrapped his face in a faded cloth, and joined the stream of pilgrims heading north. No one recognized him, but he saw everything. He passed through markets crawling with soldiers, past alleys soaked in whispers, past gates where the teacher had once healed, once smiled, once wept. Now he was silent, bound, beaten. As the crowd thickened at Golgotha, Ezra didn't push forward. He didn't climb the hill. He stood behind a boulder, far enough to be unseen but close enough to witness. 3 crosses rose against the sky, and on the center beam was the one who had spoken life into Ezra's tomb. There was no thunder, no angels, just blood, nails, and eyes, his eyes, scanning the crowd. And then they stopped. They found him, Ezra, hidden, wrapped, watching. No words were exchanged, no miracle performed, but Ezra knew. He knew exactly what that look meant. "I see you." Who had called him from the grave was in one. That night, Ezra wandered the outskirts of the city. The stars above him were cold. Heaven said nothing. The voice that once shook stone now rested behind one. No more calling, no more miracles, just a silence deeper than death itself. Then, on the 3rd morning, it came. Not a trumpet, not thunder, just rumors, half whispers. The tomb is empty. The stone is gone. He's alive. Ezra didn't run. He didn't need to. He already knew. He had heard that voice before, and no stone could hold it. That evening, Ezra quietly entered a small house where the disciples had gathered, terrified, confused, broken. No one stopped him. They all recognized the face of a man who had once returned from death himself. Peter, his voice low and brittle, asked, "You've walked through death. What do you find when everything ends?" Ezra, the man who had once refused to speak, finally opened his mouth. His voice cracked, dry from silence, but steady. "Beyond the end, there is still a voice, and that voice is stronger than death." He paused, then continued, "I saw no paradise, no flames, only absence, and then light came when he called my name." He looked around the room, at eyes filled with doubt, with hunger, with fragile hope, and spoke once more. "We are not raised to be silent. We are raised to testify." And from that moment forward, Ezra, The man who once had no words became a voice. Not a loud one, not a famous one, but a voice that would never again be silent. Because he now knew, to be brought back from death is to be summoned, to speak, to witness, to carry light into a world still haunted by the grave. Ezra died and then lived again, but he didn't return to his old life. He became a living question for the world. What if death is not the end, but the beginning of a call? Maybe you too are walking through silence. Maybe you've been waiting for a voice, a sign, something real. Ezra didn't come back to be comfortable. He came back to bear witness. And now, so can you. If you believe life is more than breath, more than survival, that it's a sacred calling, then don't stay silent. Like this video, subscribe to Journey of Fortune, and ring the bell so you never miss another story where faith meets mystery, where prophecy touches history. Share this with someone who needs hope, and tell us in the comments, if you were given a second life, what would you do differently? Because maybe your resurrection begins with this very story.